Good morning, it's 7 o'clock. You're watching Sky News Breakfast. Now, it's one of the biggest problems posed by the pandemic. How do school children catch up? Well, the government's revealed its plan, but it's already under attack. We'll talk to the Education Secretary and the Shadow Education Secretary on the programme today. Also for you this morning, the travel industry turns up the heat on the Transport Secretary to open up more European destinations for summer holidays. The Ryanair Chief Executive, Michael O'Leary, joins us at 8:30. And... Don't you wish your girlfriend was hot like me? Don't you wish... We'll talk to Pussycat doll Kimberly Wyatt at 9:30 about a new campaign to take on the culture of fast fashion. It's Wednesday, the 2nd of June. On the ropes, the government plans to help children catch up post-pandemic are criticised as they stop short of extending the school day.
After building so much expectation around an education recovery plan coming over the hill, then this really has landed like a damn squib.
Transferred by golf buggy, first footage of the Tory grandee's daughter-in-law charged over the shooting of a police superintendent in Belize. A vaccine summit to tackle misinformation as political pressure grows to ease restrictions in June after 0 COVID deaths reported yesterday. Training for the resistance, we talked to Myanmar's police defectors who tell us they had a shoot-to-kill policy. And under threat, the species in trouble because of climate change. A very good morning to you. Plans to help school children catch up after the pandemic have been revealed, but they're already under fire this morning. Unions have called them a damp squib that let down the nation's school children. Whitehall sources say plans to add half an hour to the school day were postponed following a row over the cost. The government's package amounts to £1.4 billion and will provide 100 million hours of free tuition. Our chief political correspondent, John Craig, reports.
It may be half-term this week, but these children could soon be catching up on lost lessons due to the pandemic with extra tuition under a £1.4 billion COVID rescue plan being unveiled by the government today. But here in Accrington, in Lancashire, in a red wall constituency that turned blue at the general election, teachers and parents are sceptical.
It's got to be a balance between the two. There shouldn't be a rush to kind of tuition to get them up to where they need to be. It needs to be more of a holistic understanding of what the child needs. Under
the plan, older students will be able to repeat their final year, but a move to extend the school day by half an hour has been postponed. It's claimed because of a Whitehall row over the cost.
It's quite hard because with my kids they go mosque as well, so after school they go mosque, so with extra hours it'll make it I think it'll be too long.
Announcing the recovery plan, Boris Johnson said, "This next step in our long-term catch-up plan should give parents confidence that we'll do everything we can to support children who've fallen behind." The Education Secretary says the plan for the 3 T's, extra time, teaching and tutoring, will boost children's learning after the pandemic. But teaching unions claim the funding is inadequate.
After so many big words about not letting any child be left behind, and after building so much expectation around an education recovery plan coming over the hill, then this really has landed like a damn squib.
At this boxing club in Walthamstow, East London, teenagers admit the pandemic has delivered a blow to their studies over the past year.
When I study behind the screen, it was difficult for me compared to study as a person. I get more, I can learn more when I'm talk to personally in the class, but behind the screen sometimes it's difficult.
We haven't learned nearly as much as we would. We lost about half of the year to lockdown, and even more, maybe 3/4.
So these youngsters at least are hoping the government's tuition catch-up plan will be a knockout. John Craig, Sky News.
Well, let's talk to the Education Secretary, Gavin Williamson. Good to see you this morning. Look, £1.4 billion you're putting into this. It sounds like a lot of money on the offset, but you're not spending the money that the experts say you should. Why not?
Well, it is a lot of money, and it builds on £1.7 billion that we've already committed in terms of actually delivering for children. It's an extra 100 million hours of tutoring for children. It's making sure that that children who need that help, that need that support, we're delivering that tutoring revolution to help them get it. But we recognise that it's part of a process. As I just said, over the last 12 months, we've already announced a previous £1.7 billion worth of additional funding, and we're looking at a whole raft of additional ideas of how we can continue to support our children, making sure none of them are left behind.
Yeah, but I mean, you appointed a catch-up czar, and that catch-up czar says you need £15 billion.
Well, what we've been doing is working very closely with Sir Gavin Collins, and actually the interventions around tutoring, the interventions about driving up teacher quality, these are very much built on the work that we've been doing together, recognising how incredibly important it is that we take on these interventions in order to be able to help children. That's what we're doing. You know, for so long we've known that tutoring is a real benefit for children, but sadly it's often been for preserve of those who are that little bit more wealthy. What we're doing is we're expanding it out so children right across the country are able to benefit, up to 6 million children benefiting from this tutoring regime, but also making it simpler and easier for schools to be able to access and to use. This is going to deliver such a revolution in terms of teaching. And having gone to schools and spoken to children who are already benefiting from it, they're seeing the difference. Children are seeing the difference, parents are seeing the difference, and I believe teachers are also seeing the difference. That's why it's right we continue to build on that success.
But Sir Gavin Collins says more will be needed to meet the scale of the challenge. He's effectively saying in that you haven't done enough.
And what we all recognise, and what I would say, is we more needing to be done. But
is he right? Would you have liked to have put more money into this if you had free rein to do so?
What I was just saying is that we recognise that this is part of a process. Just a few months ago, 3 months ago, we were announcing an extra £700 million worth of catch-up to support children, not just over the summer period, but going into the next year. Just a few months before that, we were announcing a further £1 billion. And this is very much part of a process, continuing to build on the success of the initiatives that are already working in schools, but making sure that we build on them, we expand them, so that more children are able to benefit. So yes, we're very much looking as to how we can continue to build on that.
Yeah, forgive me, but how is this part of a process? Because the children involved here, I mean, depending on where they are within the academic process, but a lot of them don't have time for this to be built up. This needs to be dealt with immediately for those older children in particular.
Well, that's why we've taken the measures we have done today of announcing £1.4 billion extra, recognising there are interventions that we want to see put in place straight into the next academic year. That's why we announced the previous £1.7 billion, because we recognised we wanted to get schools moving forward on this. Longer term, we do, though, want to see further changes and further improvements. That's why we're doing a review in terms of time within schools, how best we can use it. I think there's a debate to be had as to whether children should be exiting the school gate as they do in some schools at 2:45, or whether they should be in school later. Have we condensed down the lunch time? Used to be an hour. Sometimes in schools it's half an hour. It's right that we work with schools and teachers as well as parents and children as to what delivers them the best benefits. But you're right, there are some children in their academic academic career, that are coming close to the end of their academic life. That's why we're offering the option of a repeat year, so those children who don't think that they've been able to get the very best out of their education as a result of a pandemic are able to repeat it. These are actions recognising the fact that there is an urgency there, and that's why we're committed over £3 billion worth of investment to supporting children, with a recognition that more needs to be done.
But I mean, you appointed Sir Kevin Collins as the catch-up czar. I mean, do you trust him? Do you agree with him?
So we've been working incredibly closely at all stages.
Forgive me. That's a very straightforward question. Do you trust him? Do you believe in what he's trying to achieve? Yes or no?
Absolutely, and these are why the interventions.
He says you need £15 billion. You've given him 1.4 in this, 1.7 earlier on, as you say, but he says you need 15 billion. If you trust him, if you absolutely agree with him, why isn't he getting that money?
So what we've been doing is working with Sir Kevin on a whole package of measures. One of those is the expansion of our tutoring programme. There's £1 billion going into that. The other key element of that expansion and sort of support for schools and children is actually through teacher quality as well. That's why we're committing £400 million to early years and driving up teacher quality, because actually these are interventions that we've worked on together. And this is why we're organising a review in terms of time, in terms of how we look at expanding time, what is best for schools, but most importantly, what's best for pupils. What are the best interventions where there's the most evidence that goes to show this is going to have the biggest impact on children? And what we're delivering is a tutoring revolution as part of this package.
Forgive me. Look, I hate shouty, argumentative interviews. I really do. But it would be really helpful if you could answer the question, which is, if he says, you know, to implement what needs to be implemented, you need £15 billion, why is that money not coming forward? Did you fight for that money? Have you been told you can't have that money? What's going on?
Well, what we're doing is we're building up a whole set of interventions, including the £1.7 billion that's already been committed, complemented by the £1.4 billion. These are all measures that are going to have a direct impact on children. They're going to have a direct impact in terms of actually the amount of tutoring children are going to be able to get. This has far too long been the preserve of those who have been the wealthiest and only been able to afford it. We're making sure that that's expanded so all children are able to benefit. But we recognise there's more work to be done. This is part of a process, and this is why we're launching the review in terms of how we can best support children in terms of their schooling. And one of those elements is about time. Is there extra time that is required for children to be able to be in the classroom, not just for study, but also for enrichment activity as well? That's what we're undertaking to do.
But if that's so important, why hasn't that happened? An extra half hour on the school day was what was being sort of touted yesterday. That hasn't come about. I mean, that would be at least something which was a universal approach, which did affect all children. Why has that not happened? You wanted that, didn't you?
So what we've recognised is that we want to bring forward the interventions that we can deliver most rapidly for most children and ensure that actually we're able to have this hitting the road as quickly as possible. We've already started the expansion of the tutoring regime. They're aiming to get 250,000 children signed up to it, but we want to take that further. That was one of those things and one of those measures that we're able to implement and start delivering from September, and it's important that we continue to do that. On the teacher development, we're expanding our early career framework, so those teachers who are...
I'm sorry to interrupt, but you've mentioned tutoring a few times. They brought about in September getting that implemented. Only a few weeks ago, Nick Gibb, the schools minister, said that the number of children currently getting tutoring was 1% of pupils.
And this is part of a reason as to why we're expanding our sort of tutoring programme. We're on course to have signed up by the end of this year 250,000 pupils. But what we're recognising is we want to do more. We want to take that to more pupils. We want to see up to 6 million children across our school system be able to benefit from that and be able to be in the classroom benefiting from small group tutoring. We're seeing, the evidence goes to show that this delivers real help to children. It goes and sort of helps them catch up in the learning they've lost. So children who have maybe found themselves falling up to 2 months behind as a result of a pandemic, as a result of these sessions, can catch up to between either 3 and 5 months of lost learning. It really does deliver. That's why we're so determined to drive it forward.
You say there's 6 million pupils been affected by all of this. You're hoping to step up the tutoring to 250,000. I mean, that in itself is a drop in the ocean.
Sorry, you misheard me actually there, because there's 250 as part of the current scheme that we're aiming to have 250,000 pupils signed up by the end of this academic year. But what we're doing as a result of this extra money is stepping that up. So it's going to be able to impact and benefit up to 6 million pupils right across England. That's the scale of expansion of this programme, because it works. It delivers results for children. It is what actually not just children are wanting, but parents are wanting as well, because they're seeing the results. And that's why we're expanding it so massively compared to where it's been at. Because the evidence, when you go into schools, when you talk to children who are benefiting from this tutoring, you're hearing from them about how it's helping them catch up on their maths, how it's helping them better understand their English. It's giving them that advantage in order to be able to claw back that time. And that's why we've wanted to take it away, expand it from not just the 250,000 pupils that are going to be benefiting from this year, but expand it massively next year, so that millions more are going to be able to benefit from it.
I mean, if you're passionate about the need for children to get this time back, if you like, to recoup the losses that they've had over the past 16 months, how hard did you actually push at the Treasury to get the money that you needed?
Well, all the time, you're in discussions right across government. But what's great is that actually both the Prime Minister and the Chancellor and everyone is committed to making sure that we take the actions that are needed in order to be able to help children benefit. That's why we've continuously brought forward multiple packages of money. Over £3 billion that we're investing in catch-up we've already announced so far.
Yeah, but if everyone's so committed, why are you only announcing today 10% of the money that your own catch-up czar says you should have been announcing today?
What we're announcing is a package of money and actions that are going to be able to deliver for millions of children when they're coming back to school in the next sort of few weeks.
I mean, it's a pretty straight question, and I'm sorry to keep interrupting. I hate interrupting. It's only 10% of the money that Sir Kevin Collins says you should have been announcing today. So why is that?
So the reason that we're announcing this package of money, because these are measures that can be deliverable in the next academic year. They're measures that are going to be able to benefit all children. That's why we announced for £700 million just a few months ago. That's why we announced for £1 billion in the summer of last year, because they're measures that are able to have an impact on children immediately. That's been our focus, of making sure that we deliver for children straight away. That's what we're going to continue to do. And the tutoring has the biggest single impact in terms of children's attainment, what they're able to deliver. Children want it, parents want it, and actually we're delivering it on a scale that's never been seen before. And it is a true revolution in terms of what we're delivering for our schools. And a £1.4 billion package, is an important step in terms of actually ensuring children benefit in a very real way in terms of being able to pick up this extra tutoring in the classroom.
Minister, good to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Well, still to come on the programme, Labour has been very quick to criticise that education catch-up plan. The party releasing its own proposals today, so we'll talk to the Shadow Education Secretary, Kate Green, at 8:20. Future threats. Oxford and Cambridge researchers spell out some of the gravest dangers faced by the UK, including biological weapons and the misuse of AI. We'll talk about that at 8:15. And at 8:30, we'll talk to Ryanair's boss, Michael O'Leary, as he calls on the Transport Secretary to open international travel from all EU countries. Now, the Health Secretary will be amongst speakers at a global vaccine confidence summit hosted by the UK later on today. It's going to tackle misinformation, particularly in countries where there are high levels of hesitancy towards the COVID jab. A global survey from earlier this year, conducted by Imperial College London and YouGov, asked people in a number of countries if they would take a vaccine. In the UK, 81% said they would get the jab, but some countries showed weaker confidence. France was just 44%, Japan 46%. Well, the social media giants have been accused of not doing enough to tackle misinformation on the vaccine. Heidi Larson, the Director of Vaccine Confidence at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, says more needs to be understood about the issue.
Sometimes there's a disproportionate focus on misinformation and not enough attention on the underlying factors of why people are believing it. And I think some of the reasons is we're not giving a compelling enough alternative, factful story that's relevant to people's lives.
The daughter-in-law of Conservative peer Lord Ashcrofts has been charged with manslaughter by negligence after a police superintendent was shot dead in Belize. Jasmine Hartin, the partner of Michael Ashcroft's son, has been denied bail. Well, let's talk to our reporter Milena Veselinovic. And what more do we know about her well-being and her location at the moment?
Well, it's thought that she was denied bail because the police were worried she might pose a flight risk because of her Canadian citizenship. We know that she had now been transported from the holiday town of San Pedro to the mainland, to the police central prison. And we can see the video there of her being escorted from the local police station onto the back of a golf buggy. She was handcuffed, but she was allowed to place that bag on her lap, which concealed her handcuffs. Now, what is quite poignant here is that the prison where she's been taken to is one with some of the harshest conditions in the world. It featured in the Netflix documentary series Inside the World's Toughest Prisons. We've heard reports that remand prisoners like Jasmine Hartin there are sometimes housed in the same cell as convicted murderers. We've heard reports about filthy conditions inside the cells that are sometimes overrun by cockroaches. And this couldn't be more than a world away from what Jasmine Hartin's lifestyle is. She is employed in luxury hotels. She is the daughter-in-law of a prominent Tory donor. Now her lawyers are urgently seeking a Supreme Court hearing to try to free her.
OK, Milena, thank you. Security forces in Myanmar have been accused of premeditated attacks on protesters since the country's military coup. Now, in exclusive interviews from a secret location, 3 men who defected from the security forces have told us they were encouraged to open fire. Our Southeast Asia correspondent, Siobhan Robbins, reports.
Resistance is growing in a safe house in Myanmar. Once police or soldiers, now these men plan to fight the forces they used to serve. Just talking to us is a huge risk. Defectors can be punished with death. In hiding, faces and voices disguised for protection, they explain why they defied the junta.
We were told that we could shoot the protester if they gather in more than 5. We could arrest them and shoot them. We were ordered to shoot, but we couldn't do it.
While a shoot-to-kill policy has never been officially confirmed, the defectors claim they were encouraged to open fire. We contacted the junta about the allegations in this report. It hasn't responded.
My friend said if they shoot the protesters, they will get a promotion as a reward and be praised for being brave and following the junta's order.
Shoot. Just shoot. It's just my order. Just how they order the troops. If we did not follow the order, we will be punished.
As well as the shootings, the military is accused of other abuses. Abuses of power, of people, of their duty to protect.
People are calling soldiers military dogs and also accusing them of rape. Let me tell you, yes, we have seen those scenes at the front line. I was not involved in it. The officers were calling the women here and there and abusing them. Rape as well is happening.
So now the institutions they once swore an oath to are the enemy they must defeat. Their freedom has been sacrificed, families left behind. Since the coup, some protesters have travelled to rebel areas for training. The defectors will join their fight for democracy.
Those who are not familiar with the military training, they need to learn how to use the weapons, fix them, and set up them. I want to teach them. I will join this revolution till the end. I'll give my life. I'll kill them wherever I see them.
So in secret, they plan, they train, they get strong, preparing to strike back against the generals they followed for so long. Siobhan Robbins, Sky News in Bangkok.
We're looking at the other headlines for you this morning, and 6 people, including a 13-year-old boy, have been arrested in connection with a fatal stabbing in Birmingham, which one resident described as a horrible situation. Police are investigating the murder of a 14-year-old boy who was attacked by up to 7 people in the King's Standing area of Birmingham. Paramedics had to be fitted with body cameras in a bid to prevent thousands of attacks on frontline staff each year, according to officials. NHS data shows the number of assaults on frontline staff has increased by 32% over the last 5 years. A new UK task force will help stop child sexual abuse images being shared online. Analysts from the Internet Watch Foundation will grade and create digital fingerprints of millions of illegal images, sharing these with tech companies to prevent them being circulated. Nearly 300,000 pieces of potentially illegal material was identified online last year, the worst year on record. A new list of species under threat from climate change has been revealed. A report by the World Wildlife Federation says their future of certain creatures like snow leopards and puffins depends on the outcome of the COP26 summit in November. Jemima Walker reports.
Leatherback turtles in the depths of the ocean, snow leopards in the heights of the Himalayas, and puffins on the coast of the UK. These are just some of the animals whose habitats are being ravaged by global warming. The WWF says the government must use COP26 to make tangible pledges to protect the planet.
They will have to work with the Treasury and all the ministries to say, look, any commitments, any investments you make as we go into this green recovery are not contrary to the commitments we make for climate. Let's be really clear. I mean, the last 10, 15, 20 years has been littered with promises and commitments, many of which have not been seen through.
As Antarctic temperatures rise, populations of emperor penguins continue to drop. Unlike the Humboldt penguins here at Chessington Zoo, the emperor relies on frosty temperatures.
As the sea ice is melting, it's reducing the space for emperor penguins to nest and to breed, but then it also means that their predators can encroach closer on them, so there's less spaces for them to get away from those predators with that sea ice melting.
The squirrel monkey is another endangered species. Their natural habitat is a very small part of the Amazon rainforest, and they're crucial in maintaining biodiversity. But rising flood levels and temperatures could mean their entire habitat is destroyed.
We would love nothing more than our guests to be able to go out to the Amazon and see these incredible species, but unfortunately, at the rate that they're declining, the only place that they may be able to see them is here at the zoo.
The WWF says a very human response is needed to save these treasured species. They hope COP26 in November will provide an opportunity to set the wheels in motion. Jemima Walker, Sky News.
Well, the top story this morning, and the government has announced an additional £1.4 billion of funding for a catch-up programme for school children in England. The plan was drawn up by Sir Kevin Collins, appointed as the government's COVID catch-up czar in April, but reports suggest Sir Kevin requested 10 times the funding which has been allocated. So I spoke to the Education Secretary just a few minutes ago. You appointed Sir Kevin Collins as the catch-up czar. I mean, do you trust him? Do you agree with him?
So we've been working incredibly closely at all stages with Sir Kevin.
Forgive me. That's a very straightforward question. Do you trust him? Do you believe in what he's trying to achieve? Yes or no?
Absolutely, and these are why the interventions. This is why the interventions that we are.
He says you need £15 billion. You've given him 1.4 in this, 1.7 earlier on, as you say, but he says you need 15 billion. If you trust him, if you absolutely agree with him, why isn't he getting that money?
So what we've been doing is working with Sir Kevin on a whole package of measures. One of those is the expansion of our tutoring programme. There's £1 billion going into that. The other key element of that expansion and sort of support for schools and children is actually through teacher quality as well. That's why we're committing £400 million to early years and driving up teacher quality, because actually these are interventions that we've worked on together. And actually this is why we're organising a review in terms of time, in terms of how we look at expanding time, what is best for schools, but most importantly, what's best for pupils.
Well, let's talk to the General Secretary of the Association of School and College Leaders, Jeff Barton. Good to see you this morning. What do you make of this plan?
Oh, it's pretty dispiriting, Stephen, isn't it? Here I am as somebody who's leading a trade union, and all of my colleagues, it feels this morning as if we have got higher ambitions of the nation's children and young people than the Education Secretary. It's pretty pitiful, isn't it? Only yesterday we were hearing stories about extending the school day, and even if some people disagreed with it, at least there was a sense of let's do something radical, let's do something different. Today's announcement essentially equates to £50 per head. You compare that with the USA, which is putting £1,600 per head per young person. The Netherlands, £2,500 per head. So what is it about those children in the Netherlands or the USA that makes them worth more than our Education Secretary, our government, seems to say? It's time to stop the rhetoric, I think, and start the action on behalf of children and young people.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned the longer school days. We've certainly got the impression that the Education Secretary would have liked to have longer school days, but perhaps he's been blocked one way or another from doing that. But, I mean, you as a union, you're not particularly in favour of that, are you?
Oh, well, we as a union have got the best motto in the world. We speak on behalf of members. We act on behalf of children and young people. And, you know, what there is at the heart of the announcement today, Stephen, isn't just something disappointing in financial terms. It's actually disappointing in terms of the ambition about what education is about and what it's for. And what I know as being an English teacher of 32 years and a head teacher of 15 years is the idea that 15 hours of extra maths is the solution at the end of a global pandemic is just pitiful. It's woeful. That actually, if what you could do after school is to make sure that the kind of activities that I'm guessing Gavin Williamson and the Chancellor used to have routinely at their schools, that is, all the extracurricular commitment to the arts, to sport, as well as tuition. So that was the norm for them. Why should that not be an entitlement to every child of every background, particularly on the watch of a government that says it's going to level up for those communities? Today is a day I think we'll look back on and think, why is it that when we could find so much money for so many other projects, the future of our nation in terms of our young people were not worth investing in properly.
I mean, you say £15 billion. I mean, to be fair, that's what Sir Kevin Collins has recommended. But what would that other 90% be used for? How would that directly affect the education and the catch-up of these young people?
Well, I think the most expensive part of all of this is if you decide that you are going to do something around the school day. So if you were truly ambitious, you might say, what would it look like if schools were to start at 8 in the morning and to finish at 5:30 in the evening? And that became the new norm. That teachers focus on what they do in the classroom, because we know that's the number one ingredient. So we welcome today the fact there is a commitment to more teacher training. That's a good thing. But wouldn't that then allow you to employ other specialists who could help with mental health issues where we know there is a crisis for too many young people? That you could bring in sports coaches after school, that you could have the richness of culture and the arts after school, not just because you're either paying for it or lucky enough to go to a school that can afford it, but because we see it as a national entitlement. And that would give a sense of coming out of a crisis with a much greater sense of ambition. And yes, it would cost, but it seems to us that the cost of not doing all of this, of young people not in the future getting the qualifications and then the jobs they need, is a much more deep-rooted, longer-term one. And shame on us if we don't really embrace the opportunity to do something better.
Look, a lot of people watching I will probably be thinking, at least some people watching, and where the taxpayers paying for this are going to think, well, why spend money on arts and sport when actually these kids need to be learning maths and English?
Oh, well, it's not an either or. I mean, I know as a head teacher, I used to come under pressure from some of the staff actually saying, we think that this young person should be taken out of their PE lessons or their music lessons to do extra maths. I think that's a misguided view. It's not always about quantity, it's about the quality of the teaching. So let's free the teachers up to do that. And, you know, what I saw is that young people who were taking part in extracurricular activities often did better in the classroom. And you only have to look to our great independent schools, where that has been the great tradition, that you do better in your maths exam because you're doing better playing hockey or whatever it is. That has been a proud tradition, and this could have been an opportunity to say that enrichment costs, but the cost of not doing this is long-term and deeply damaging for our young people.
Jeff Barton, good to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen.
Let's talk to our political correspondent, Tamara Cohen, who's in Westminster. What do you think, Tamara?
Well, a lot of people in the education world not very happy about this announcement. They say it was much trailed as the way to help school children who've lost out on so much over the past year try to catch up. There was all sorts of ideas knocking around, particularly from Sir Kevin Collins, a former head teacher who Boris Johnson hired back in February to advise on this. He at the time talked about a longer school day, doing more sports and music and so on. None of that is in here. It's all about tutoring, which a lot of people say is an approach that evidence shows does work, and that it could be extended to millions of pupils. It's been pretty slow to start so far. But even if it was extended to 6 million pupils, that would only be about 5 hours a year each, because this is over 3 years. So many in the education world saying, where's the rest of it?
OK, Tamara, thank you. Now, yesterday marked 100 years since as many as 300 African Americans were murdered in the American city of Tulsa. President Biden went to the site to mark one of the worst episodes of racial violence in American history, and he's the first president to take part in the memorial, as Michelle Clifford reports.
Within 24 hours, the community would be completely destroyed at the hands of thousands of white rioters. It was a massacre.
A century on, and a president grappling with today's racial tensions in America travelled to Tulsa to confront the past, being told the horrific detail of one of the darkest but largely overlooked moments in this country's history. He came to remember those who died, but also to promise change, saying the battle for racial equality in America is far from over.
For much too long, the history of what took place here was told in silence, cloaked in darkness. But just because history is silent, it doesn't mean that it did not take place. And while darkness can hide much, it erases nothing. It erases nothing.
Greenwood, known as Black Wall Street, was a prosperous African-American community a century ago, where on the night of May the 31st, white rioters gunned down residents and set fire to homes block by block after a black man was accused of assaulting a white girl. An estimated 300 people were killed and thousands left homeless. Leslie Benningfield was a child of 6 that night. The memories for her are still vivid, but painful to recall.
The soldiers were coming in to run the rebels out, and everybody was running and hiding and trying to get away. I don't know, it's just a big mess.
Only now are many discovering what happened in this part of the USA a century ago, and demands are being made for reparations for Greenwood. The events of that night were long suppressed, were not taught in schools, and even those who lived through the horror found it hard to speak about.
The truth of it truly needs to come out so that real healing can happen, so that there are so many that are still bound to that incident and what it meant and what it took away, that they can't move on into what they can have and create.
Part of that healing may come for some families if they're finally able to lay their ancestors to rest. Mass graves from the massacre are being excavated in the hope of identifying the bodies. This taking place a century after so many died and at a time of racial reckoning in America. Michelle Clifford, Sky News, Washington.
Now, Oxford and Cambridge researchers are warning of future extreme risks greater than COVID-19. In a report published today, they're calling on the government not to fight the last war, but prepare for the risks of the future now. Well, one of the authors of the report is Toby Ord. Good to see you this morning. I mean, what are the risks we need to be looking at?
Yes, we think that the key risks that the government should be focusing on now are to do with biosecurity more generally than COVID, new pandemics that are naturally arising, but also to prepare for bioweapons or lab escapes from dangerous research, and to prepare for the dangers that AI could pose as it continues to develop.
OK, let's talk biosecurity to begin with there. I mean, what do we mean by biosecurity?
Well, in the same way that we need to protect people with national security, we need to protect the citizens of the UK and the wider world from biological threats. These threats could come from nature, but they could also come from other countries or from terrorist groups.
Why do we think they're likely to pose more of a threat in the future?
Well, the threat that they pose is increasing as the technology around them increases. We've had these dramatic breakthroughs in biotechnology over recent decades, and things that were only achievable by the very top scientists in the world 2 years later are being done in science competitions by very bright students. So there's more and more actors who have the ability to create dangerous threats if they so choose.
So how do we even begin to think of protecting against that then, if this is all becoming more and more commonplace?
It is extremely difficult, and the main thing we're saying is that it warrants substantially more attention. The UK needs to spend millions to save billions in this case, to kind of take out an insurance policy against these types of risks. But an example with biosecurity in particular is to have a prize to improve developments in metagenomic sequencing. This is where you sequence all the DNA and RNA in a sample from a patient, and then you can find, even if there is a completely novel pathogen that science has never seen before, you can detect that against a database. If this had been done in Wuhan, then we would have known that there was something that was most similar to SARS, but different to anything that we knew on day one.
OK. Look, when it comes to AI, I mean, scientists have warned against AI for quite a long time, but on the basis that artificial intelligence, as we call it, doesn't actually exist yet. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, there's dramatic progress in AI at the moment, and it's increasing as we speak. But we don't know exactly how far it will go. There's still a lot of disagreement, although many scientists within artificial intelligence believe that in the next few decades, we'll reach the point where AI abilities surpass human level. But there are problems that we have to be concerned about before that point, and then different kinds of problems after.
Such as?
Well, in the near term, at the moment, there are extremely good text generation systems that if you tell it a topic, it can produce vast amounts of text on that. That or things that modify video to show public figures doing things they didn't really do are examples of things that could be dangerous in terms of propaganda or could swing an election. And another example for the UK in particular is that it would be very dangerous if we were to include AI systems inside our nuclear command and control and communications systems.
I mean, part of the issue we look at AI more widely is the idea that once something actually does develop its own intelligence, that they're just going to learn at such... Is it right they would learn at such an exponential rate that they would just surpass us within months or years?
That is a very live concern and a theory. It's not clear what would happen. Maybe it would plateau at a level below ours or perhaps just slightly above ours. But we need to take seriously the possibility that things could go wrong and to invest more, given how many people's lives and livelihoods are at stake.
Toby, good to talk to you this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.